with English, it's a very interesting dichotomy for me. I wasn't very good at teaching English, in my opinion, because that is something that always came super natural to me. Like I was reading at a really high level when I was really young. I love to read. I always have. It was never, ever hard for me. Writing was never, ever hard for me that I can remember, right? So you can imagine with like more of a natural ability like that, if you will, trying to teach that can be difficult because I'd be in a situation where I'm like, just fucking write a sentence.
Yeah.
I don't get it. Like, just write a sentence and then another sentence. It's a paragraph. It's not that hard, So it was sometimes really difficult for me to know how to teach it or understand what the gaps in the learning there were, because I never went through that myself. So I think you could say the same thing about any skill. Like if you're I don't want to say too good at it, but if you haven't struggled with it much, it can be hard, initially at least, to go through and help somebody else understand something, because it's just not computing for you. Like I don't get it.
That's really interesting. I think we see that all the time in the dog training space.
Absolutely.
With trainers, that like it comes so naturally to them, you know, that they haven't broken it down for themselves to be able to instruct others
exactly.
on it.
Exactly.
It's really, really, really interesting.
Yeah, I think that's why you've had such success with teaching people, is because you didn't have a dog until what? How old were you?
Like 18.
Yeah, like 18. So like you didn't grow up with a dog.
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of trainers, you know, since I was a baby, I had, had
Yeah.
this German Shepherd by me, and it's like, it's like a natural thing to them, which I definitely understand that. Like when you're trying to teach someone that this lesson that you're in your head is an easy, like,
it's just automatic.
Yeah. It's like drinking water, like you know how to do it. Like, so it's second nature. So it's really hard to break that down when
For sure.
like you said, you haven't had to really like teach yourself.
Yeah, and like look at people like Caesar and the Dog Whisperer and stuff. That's a lot of people's biggest issue with guys like him, is that the people that have this like intuitive approach to dog training, where it's just I just kind of work with them and I connect with them and I do it really well and it all works out, right? They don't have like a really broken down like understanding of what they're doing. And it's virtually impossible to coach an owner through doing those types of things.
Yep. And it's like, if you watch the Dog Whisperer, some people get it and they're like on the same wavelength and they don't have problems. And some people it's like, what?
Yeah.
It's just,
I gotta.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we were talking about it last night, just using an example of, when we were doing that lesson with Leo and I asked the owner, what he thought of the level, right? Like, to us as dog trainers, something as simple as understanding if the level that you're using on your e-collar is high enough, right? Or the treat you're using is motivating enough, or whatever it is that you're doing, right? I feel like we can get into this state of mind where we just think that's such a normal, obvious thing that you should be aware of and in tune with. But like repeatedly, one of the things I was talking with Bradley about yesterday was I've gotten myself into this habit of asking people these stupid little questions that should be so obvious. And under 9 out of 10 times when I ask them the question, they are not in tune with the thing that I'm asking of them. And we used the example of the level on the e-collar. I was working with a client and he was correcting the dog. And I asked him, I was like, what do you think about that level, right? What do you think the dog thinks of that level? And he was like, well, I actually wasn't thinking about it at all, right? And the reason why I asked it is because he was using a level that clearly was way too low. The dog literally was almost you wouldn't even think that he was getting a correction, right? And that would be something where, like, when you're working on that on your own for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, whatever, if you're not in tune with that level, you're never going to accomplish anything. Right? Because you're not going to be gauging the motivation of the dog. And getting people to be aware of those types of things and understanding this stuff doesn't come so naturally to some people. And you have to coach them through all of those micro details of stuff is so important.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It could seem so redundant to you, but for them, it's the first time they ever thought about it.
Yeah. I mean, even another really common example that I'm sure we've seen a million times is when somebody's got their dog on a leash and the dog starts pulling, and then what is it? They just...
Well, we just saw that yesterday in the lesson Michelle was doing.
Yeah. I swear, I see it every day pretty much. And it's like, oh, so what's happening right here is you're actually kind of reinforcing the pulling right now because the dog pulls, and then you just extend your arm and you walk along and you're like, okay, now we're going this way. And you want to flip that on its head. Like, you want to get the dog to yield to your leash pressure. And a lot of people who are used to not really training dogs and maybe having dogs, they're just like using their leash as a tether.
Yeah.
So the dog doesn't run away.
Exactly.
And they're like, oh, wow, really? I didn't even realize. And of course, if you're a dog trainer, it's like, well, yeah, duh. But not everybody's a dog trainer, and there's nothing wrong with explaining something dumb or basic, because it's not dumb or basic.
Not. That's why they're hiring you.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
We can't expect owners to understand these things. And it's so funny, like, the concept used with the leash pressure, right? Like, every time when we tell the owner that for the first time, it's like, you know what I mean? Because they weren't even aware they were doing it.
Yep.
Right. Why would they be aware that they're doing it?
Because they're not a dog trainer.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So by looking at every concept you use, don't ever find yourself in the trap of convincing yourself this is obvious. This is so obvious they should just know it.
Absolutely.
Right. Even if it is literally the most obvious thing in the world. Instruct on it and let them know so that they understand it and make those adjustments.
Yeah, absolutely.
100%.
Because if not, like, these are the reasons why people come up with so many issues, right? Like that lesson we were watching yesterday. Michelle did a lesson with this new dog, Hazel, I believe. And I remember I spoke with the woman on the phone a couple of weeks ago when she signed up, and she was convinced she needed to get rid of this dog because it was so terrified of everything. Now, once we met the dog really wasn't that scared in the grand scheme of scared dogs that we work with. But the issue she was having was she would go out on walks, and once the dog got a little startled by something, it would plant itself on the ground and it would not move anymore, right? Or it would turn around and try to drag her back home. And I remember her almost crying over the phone when I was talking to her, just like, I just want to, like, do you think there's a or she asked something like, if we get through the program or like halfway through the program and it's apparent that I'll never be able to take my dog for a walk, will you please let me know so we don't waste all of the sessions? And I was like, yes, but
that's not
I
going to happen.
assure you that you will be able to take your dog for a walk, right?
Yeah.
And it's interesting, like, once we get eyes on these situations that to some owners seem unsolvable, right? To her, she will never be able to walk. She cannot fathom the idea she'll ever be able to walk the dog. But to us, we look at the situation, and the reason why she is not able to walk her dog is solely because she has been heeding to the dog the entire time.
Absolutely.
That's it.
That's it.
Right?
It's simple.
And it's like, a lot of times, like, initially, like with this dog, like we started teaching it leash pressure, and there were some situations I remember the dog would put the brakes on and she would like freeze up. And I remember at one point I looked at her, I was like,
yeah. Come on, keep going.
Right?
You got this.
And she started walking, and the dog bucked for a minute, and then it started walking with her.
Yeah.
Right? And that was a situation where up into that exact moment, anytime that happened, she would freeze, she would stop there, and she'd be like, I got to pick the dog up, right? We got to go walk back home, stuff like that, right? And it's just so much easier to get past. And I get a lot of people, like, they look at that and it's like, in her case, she had to like keep moving. The dog stopping is not an option right now. And a lot of people look like, oh, but I don't want to be mean to the dog. I don't want to be harsh to the dog. But we don't realize, like, there's only two alternatives. You know what I mean? Or there's only two options. Option one is the dog is going to heed to you and you're going to be in control of the walk. Option number two is you're going to heed to the dog and the dog will always be in control of the walk. And when you have genetically unstable dogs or fearful dogs, them being in control of the walk means when they say, I'm done walking, or I need to go back home because I'm scared of that trash can over there, you will always be at the mercy of that. There is no in between with it.
Yeah.